What do you do when your gut tells you something's off, but the numbers say everything's fine? Graham Lockett leaned back in his leather office chair, staring out the window of his downtown office. 12 auto repair shops under his name, steady growth for 5 years straight, no major complaints on paper, everything was perfect. But something had been gnawing at him for months. A pattern he couldn't ignore. Customer reviews that used to be glowing were now lukewarm. A couple even mentioned feeling pressured or misled at one of the shops in Easton. That one had been part of the original 5 he bought from an old friend before expanding. He hadn't been to most of the stores in person lately between corporate strategy meetings and investor calls. He'd become more of a figurehead than a leader. The district manager, Rick, assured him the location was doing just fine. But something about Rick's tone felt rehearsed, too smooth. So Graham made a decision. He told his assistant he'd be unavailable for a few days and left his phone behind on purpose. No emails, no calls, just him and whatever was really happening on the ground. He wore a gray shop uniform and used the name Greg. Shaved the beard, added some fake crow's feet around his eyes with a makeup kit his niece had once shown him how to use. He even put on a slight limp, just enough to look like a guy who'd done labor work before. He'd never met the current employees at the Easton shop. Turnover had changed most of the faces since he bought the place. And with it being a corporate-owned location, no one expected the CEO to walk through the doors pretending to be a new hire. "Hey, you the new guy?" a woman asked when he stepped inside the garage the next morning. "Yeah, Greg," Graham said, offering a hand. She looked him up and down. "Tessa Garrison, floor lead, you're with me today. You ever done tire rotations before?" "Couple times," Graham said. "Enough to not look totally incompetent. Cool. Let's keep it moving. We're short 2 techs this week, one quit, one's out with a busted knee." That explained the hiring gap. Graham nodded and followed her to the back. The garage smelled like burnt oil and metal, a scent he weirdly missed. Tessa worked fast and didn't sugarcoat anything. "That's Donnie over there, he's been here the longest, knows his stuff but don't expect much small talk, and that's Illy, he's new-ish but solid." Graham kept his head down, learning the ropes as if he were brand new. He noticed a few things right away. The break room was tiny and barely stocked. The schedule was handwritten on the wall with a dry erase marker that had definitely dried out. And the shop phone rang constantly, usually unanswered. By lunch, Graham had already rotated 2 sets of tires and helped Tessa with a brake pad change. His shoulders ached and he was sweating through his shirt, but he felt more alive than he had in months. Then he heard it. "Yeah, these pads are shot." "Honestly, you're better off upgrading the whole system," Donnie said to a man standing by a silver Honda. The customer, a guy in his 20s, looked confused. "Wait, I just had these replaced like 6 months ago." Donnie shook his head. Whoever did it didn't know what they were doing. "I can get you on a high-performance kit, safer, lasts longer. You'd be dumb not to, especially if you drive a lot." Graham froze. From where he stood, he could see the pads clearly. They were barely worn, no cracks, no warping, not even close to needing replacement, let alone an upgrade. The customer hesitated. "How much are we talking? Parts and labor?" "Roughly 1,100, Donnie said, casually wiping his hands on a rag. "Want me to get started?" Graham saw the man glance down, clearly debating it, but before he could answer, Tessa walked over and gently interrupted. "Mind if I take a second look at those pads?" "I've got a minute," she said calmly. Donnie frowned. "I already told him, just want to double check," she said, already crouching beside the car. A pause. Then she stood up and looked the customer in the eye. "You're good. Maybe another 10 to 15,000 miles on those. No need to replace anything right now." The guy blinked. "Seriously?" Tessa nodded. "You're safe, but come back in 6 months for a free check if you're worried." The customer looked relieved. "Thanks." "Appreciate that." He left, and Donnie didn't say a word, just walked off. Graham's jaw tightened. His instinct was to step in right there, but he kept it together. He needed to see more. That night he lay in his motel bed staring at the ceiling. Donnie hadn't just lied, he'd pushed a massive upsell on someone who clearly didn't need it. And if Tessa hadn't stepped in, Graham didn't sleep much. He had work to do. Graham arrived early the next morning, well before the bay doors opened. The air was sharp, the kind that cut through clothing and sank into your bones. He stood in the lot with a coffee he didn't want and watched the building in silence. The concrete walls were stained with years of exhaust residue and road salt. A flickering security light buzzed above the entrance. He stepped inside and found Tessa already there, hunched over an inventory sheet in the cramped stockroom. She glanced up, nodded once, and went back to her clipboard. "You always in this early?" he asked. "Only way to know what we actually have before the orders start rolling in." She didn't look up. "Takes about 40 minutes to reconcile what's missing. We've had delays in parts delivery for 3 weeks and the system's never right." Graham leaned against the doorframe. "Isn't that something the manager should be tracking?" Tessa gave a short laugh. "Rick, he hasn't been here in person in over a month, sensibly to drop off whatever he wants us to push that week. Rest's up to us." She walked past him toward the garage, tossing the clipboard on the counter as she went. He followed her in, but his mind was already somewhere else. Rick, his district manager, wasn't just absent. He was orchestrating sales pushes remotely through unclear channels. His gut, the same one that told him something was wrong in the first place, tightened again. By mid-morning, the shop was in full swing. Graham was elbow-deep in a radiator job with Ali, who'd shown up with a busted lip and a stiff walk. "You all right?" Graham asked, wiping his hands. Ali shrugged. "Long night. I do security part-time, had to step in on a fight at the bar." "You working 2 jobs?" "Yeah, this gig's all right, but 38 hours a week doesn't cut it." "I asked for full-time, but Rick said we're maxed out on hours." Graham stared at the engine bay, running the numbers in his head. Easton was a high-volume location. There was no reason a competent tech like Ali shouldn't have full hours unless someone wanted flexible bodies without committing to benefits. "You ever work at another shop?" Graham asked carefully. "Yeah, smaller one out in Norwood. Guy ran a tight crew, but we all had 40 hours. Just couldn't keep up with rent out there." Ali's hands moved automatically, tightening clamps, checking lines. He clearly knew what he was doing. Graham nodded, then turned when he heard raised voices near the customer desk. "I'm telling you, I don't want anything else done." "I came for an oil change." A woman's voice snapped. Graham stepped closer. A middle-aged woman in scrubs, clearly on a break from the hospital, was standing stiffly in front of Donnie, who had a clipboard in one hand and an annoyed look on his face. "I'm just giving you options," Donnie said. "You've got corrosion on your battery terminals and your filters are overdue if you don't want to take care of your car." "I said I don't have the money right now, I just need the basic service." Donnie didn't move. "Look, we're not in the business of sending people back on the road with half a job done. You sure you want to be responsible if something goes wrong?" The woman's face hardened. "Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. Just do the oil change." Tessa appeared beside Graham, arms crossed, watching the exchange. "Donnie," she called, loud enough to interrupt. "Need you in Bay 3 now." He turned sharply. "I'm in the middle of I'm not asking," she said, her tone flat. Donnie tossed the clipboard on the counter and stalked off. As the woman sat down in the waiting area, Graham approached Tessa. "He always like that?" Tessa's jaw worked for a second before she answered. "Depends who's watching." "Why hasn't anyone reported him?" She gave him a look. "To who?" "Rick, he's the one that trained Donnie. Said upselling was part of the job, maximize the ticket, he called it." Graham's stomach turned. That afternoon, a customer came in with a rattling noise. Graham and Ali inspected it together and found a loose heat shield. 5-minute fix, no parts needed. Graham logged it and explained it to the customer, who looked surprised. "That's it? You're not gonna charge me for something?" "No need. Just a quick adjustment," Graham said. The man smiled, genuinely relieved. "Last place I went said I needed a new exhaust system." As he left, Ali turned to Graham. "You know, little stuff like that, that's how you get people to come back." Graham nodded, but his mind was racing. Later, while restocking oil filters, he found Tessa alone, leaning against the wall with her eyes closed. "You good?" "Yeah," she muttered. "Just 5 minutes, haven't had a break all day." He checked the wall clock. It was nearly 4. "No break since when?" "Since I clocked in." "Someone has to keep things moving." "You're not supposed to go all day without food," she chuckled without humor. "Well, when you're the only one who actually tracks bay times and makes sure customers leave without suing us, you do what you have to." He hesitated. "Why are you still here, Tess? You could walk into any shop and they'd be lucky to have you." She opened her eyes and looked at him for a long beat. "Because I care about the crew, and because if I leave, Donnie runs this place." Graham said nothing. That night, he drove to the next town over and parked behind a diner. He pulled out his personal phone and called his HR director. "I need a full audit on Easton," he said. "Employee hours, complaints, everything, quietly." "Understood. Is there a problem?" "There's a culture issue. And I think it goes higher than just the on-site crew." The next morning, Graham arrived before sunrise again. Tessa wasn't there. Instead, Donnie was at the desk, scrolling through his phone, feet kicked up. "You opening today?" Graham asked. Donnie looked up, annoyed. Tessa called out. "Said she needed a mental health day. That's the second time this month. Told Rick we need a new team lead." Graham stared at him. "She's the only reason this place hasn't fallen apart," Donnie scoffed. "She thinks she's management, but she's just a tech with a clipboard." "You want more hours, by the way. I can float you to a couple shops if you push the high-margin stuff." Graham held his gaze. "What exactly does that mean?" Donnie stood, voice low. "You know, batteries, filters, engine flushes, doesn't matter if they need it. People don't know cars. They just want someone to tell them what to do." Graham stepped in closer. "Is that how you were trained?" "Rick taught me everything I know." Donnie smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And I sell more than anyone in this district. So if you're smart, you'll learn how to play the game." Graham stared at him for a long moment. "I've learned enough." He stepped outside, pulled out his phone, and made 2 calls. The first was to HR, effective immediately. "Donnie's done." The second was to Rick. "I'm at Easton. You and I are having a conversation, in person. Today." Rick tried to stall, but Graham didn't give him a choice. By noon, Rick arrived at the shop. He wore a pressed polo and mirrored sunglasses, acting like he was doing a courtesy visit. "Didn't expect to see you here," Rick said, looking around. "Let's talk in the office," Graham said. Once the door shut, Graham didn't waste time. "I've been working here the past 3 days, not observing, working." Rick blinked. "Wait, what?" "You and Donnie have created a culture of pressure and manipulation. You've been encouraging unethical upselling and ignoring legitimate staffing concerns. You've built a system that rewards exploitation." Rick raised his hands. "Hold on, that's a stretch. We push services, sure, but it's all optional." You threatened Tessa's job for calling out after working 12-hour shifts with no break. You've kept Ellie under full-time hours to avoid benefits. And you trained Donnie to upsell unnecessary work to customers. That's not optional. That's systemic abuse." Rick's voice sharpened. "Look, I've kept this store profitable. You wanted numbers, I delivered. At the cost of everything that makes this company worth running." Rick leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what, you're going to fire me?" "For doing my job," Graham didn't hesitate. "You're no longer with the company. Security will escort you out." Rick's expression broke into disbelief, then anger. "You're making a huge mistake." "No," Graham said, standing. "The mistake was leaving people like you in charge." By the time Rick was gone, the shop was quiet. Tessa returned the next day, surprised to find Rick's name scrubbed from the schedule and Donnie's tools boxed up. Graham approached her. No disguise this time. "I'm Graham Lockett. I own this company." Tessa blinked, stunned. "I came here to see what was happening firsthand, and thanks to you, I saw everything I needed." She didn't say anything right away. "You're getting a raise, effective immediately," Graham continued, "and I want you to help me rebuild this shop. You'll help hire a new lead tech, restructure bay flow, and design a training program that puts honesty first." Tessa's voice was quiet. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." She looked around the shop, then back at him. Then let's fix it properly. Tessa leaned against the back wall of the garage, arms crossed, watching a young customer nervously pace near the desk. Graham stood beside her in his regular clothes, now not Greg anymore, and listened as the customer explained that he'd been quoted nearly $1,800 for a brake overhaul and transmission flush 2 weeks earlier. He'd gone for a second opinion elsewhere. The brakes were fine. The transmission didn't need flushing. The tension in the room was thick. The customer wasn't angry, just shaken and embarrassed. Tessa didn't have to say anything. Graham already knew who had handled that quote. He turned to Ali, who was at the tool bench organizing socket sets. "You ever hear Donnie push a flush like that before?" Ali glanced over, hesitant. "Yeah, pretty often. Especially if the customer didn't seem to know much about cars. He'd say it was preventative." Graham nodded once, then walked to the desk and handed the customer a prepaid voucher for his next 3 services. "No expiration date. Donnie's no longer with us," he said. "That kind of pressure isn't part of how we operate anymore." The customer looked surprised. "You're the owner, right?" "I am." The man took the voucher slowly. "I appreciate it. Honestly." After he left, Tessa stepped back into the garage and started reviewing the day's service queue. They were short again, and the wait times were already stretching. "Illy's solid, but we need at least 2 more techs before this place collapses," she said, eyes scanning the clipboard. "1 full-time minimum and someone part-time who can float weekends. I'm working on it. I've asked HR for immediate posting and flagged this location as priority," Graham replied. "But hiring's going to take time. In the meantime, I'll be on the floor until we're stable." She glanced at him. "You're serious about staying on the floor?" "I didn't come here to watch. I came to fix what I ignored." She gave a small nod and walked back toward Bay 1. Graham followed. That afternoon, Graham helped Ali with an overheating issue on a Dodge Caravan. They traced it to a cracked thermostat housing and a failing water pump. Ali worked clean, methodical. He didn't cut corners. Between jobs, Graham asked him about his training. "I learned most of it in high school shop class," Illy said, tightening a bolt. "My uncle runs a garage in Cleveland, taught me a lot when I was 15. Been around engines since I could hold a wrench." "You ever think about getting ASC certified?" Graham asked. Illy wiped his hands. "Thought about it, yeah, but it's pricey. Plus, I'd need time off to study. You get certified, I'll reimburse every penny. And I'll make sure you get the schedule you need to do it," Graham said. Illy blinked. "You're being serious right now?" "Dead serious. This company doesn't grow unless you do." Illy didn't say anything for a moment. Then he nodded once and got back to work, eyes sharper than they'd been all week. Later, Graham reviewed the shop's supply chain logs in the back office. What he found didn't surprise him: irregular parts orders, duplicate entries, and a pattern showing inflated inventory requests that didn't match actual usage. Rick had been padding numbers and pushing high-margin items like air filters and battery replacements far beyond reasonable levels. It wasn't just a sales problem, it was fraud. He picked up the phone and called the procurement director. "I need a forensic audit of every supply order tied to Easton for the last 12 months. Cross-check against actual service records, and flag anything Rick approved directly." "Understood," came the reply. "Do you want to involve legal?" "Not yet, but keep them in the loop." Quietly, he hung up and returned to the garage. The next customer was different, a woman in her 60s, driving a rusted-out Ford Taurus. The car wheezed into the bay and she stepped out cautiously, holding a handwritten list. "I was told I need new brake rotors, a new battery, and a full coolant flush," she said, voice uncertain. I don't know if it's true." Graham took the list and glanced over it. "Who gave you this?" "Guy named Donnie, said he worked here. I couldn't afford it that day, so I came back now." Tessa stepped over and took the paper from Graham's hand. "Let us take a quick look for you, no charge." The inspection took under 15 minutes. The battery was fine. The rotors had wear but still within spec. The coolant was a little old but not urgent. When Graham explained this to the woman, her eyes filled with quiet frustration. "I knew it," she whispered. I felt like I was being tricked. You were, Graham said softly. She hesitated. I've always trusted this place. I've been coming here since your signs first went up. I'm sorry we broke your trust, he said. I'll make sure we earn it back. After she left, Tessa leaned against the lift and exhaled sharply. How many people did he do this to? She asked. Too many, Graham said. But it ends now. That evening after they closed, Graham gathered the team in the garage. Just him, Tessa, Illy, and a part-time front desk hire named Jordan who'd started the week before. I know this place has been running on fumes, he said. I let the wrong people define what we stood for. That's on me, he paused, looking each of them in the eye, but we're rebuilding it and not just patching holes. Real change, you're the foundation. Tessa looked over at Illy, then back at Graham. We're with you, but we need resources. We're holding on, but just barely. You'll get them. The hiring process is already started. We'll bring in the right people. And starting tomorrow, I'm installing a new scheduling system so no one works more than 5 days without a day off. No exceptions. Jordan raised his hand timidly. This might sound dumb, but does that mean we'll get actual breaks? Graham nodded. Yes, breaks are mandatory. If someone misses theirs, I want to know. Jordan looked relieved. Thank you, I was worried I wouldn't last here. You will, Graham said. If you stick to the right values, you'll go far. After they left, Graham stayed behind. He sat at the service desk, staring at the empty bays, the silence deafening after a day of constant motion. The place had been broken, but it wasn't beyond repair. He pulled out a notepad and started making a list. Recruit certified lead tech, implement real-time scheduling software, new training modules. Ethics, transparency, customer communication, anonymous employee reporting system, rotate field visits, quarterly CEO on site. Unannounced, he tapped the pen against the desk. Then he added one last line. Never let distance become blindness again. On Monday morning, the Easton shop opened under a new rhythm, quieter, more deliberate. The usual clatter of tools and engine lifts remained, but there was a noticeable shift in how people moved. The energy hadn't fully turned hopeful yet, but it was no longer brittle. Graham arrived just before opening, dressed in jeans and a work jacket, clipboard in hand. He wasn't there to observe anymore, he came to lead. The first thing he did was take inventory, not of parts but of people. Illy was already there, organizing the coolant trays by brand and model. Jordan checked the appointment system at the front, typing with both focus and caution. Tessa stepped in 10 minutes later, hair tied back, her walk slower than usual. You look like you got 4 hours tops, Graham said. 3.5. My neighbor's kid had an asthma scare. Ambulance came around too, she replied, tying her apron. I'll push through. You won't have to. I called in a technician from the Westfield location. He's floating here for the next 6 weeks, starts tomorrow. Tessa blinked. You mean it's not just us anymore? Not anymore, Graham said. And I want you off the floor by 2 today. Take the afternoon. Paid. You sure? Dead sure. She nodded just once and moved toward Bay 3, still absorbing the idea that help might actually be coming. Mid-morning, Graham caught Jordan pulling a customer aside gently. Sir, your oil filter is the wrong size for this engine block. We'll swap it out with the correct one, no extra charge. Just wanted to be transparent. Graham waited until the customer left before stepping forward. How'd you catch it? I've been reviewing the filter chart every night. Figured I needed to learn fast if I'm gonna stay here, Jordan said. Didn't want to get caught giving bad info. You won't. That was the right call. Keep doing it that way. Jordan looked both surprised and relieved. Thanks, I didn't think anyone noticed. I notice everything now, Graham said, and anyone who puts in the effort gets my full support. The day moved slowly but steadily. One of the afternoon appointments was a father with his teenage son, both sitting in the waiting area while their SUV was in Bay 2. The boy kept peeking over the counter, clearly curious. Graham walked over. You like cars? He asked. The boy nodded. Yeah, I want to build one someday. Like from scratch? Graham glanced back at the lift. Come on, stand back from the tools, but you can watch. The boys' eyes lit up. Graham led them out to the bay, had Ellie walk through what they were doing, replacing a leaking valve cover gasket, and let the boy ask questions. Afterward, the father pulled Graham aside. Most places would have just told him to sit down and wait. Thanks for letting him look around. Anytime. Might be one of our future hires, Graham said. Later that afternoon, HR sent over the preliminary results of the audit. Graham stepped into the back office, shut the door, and read through them carefully. There were clear patterns. Rick had submitted inflated parts orders across 3 locations, not just Easton. He'd rerouted vendor discounts into a side entity registered under a relative's name. And Donnie had a trail of customer complaints that had been quietly closed without escalation. Graham forwarded the documents to legal, then called the CFO. Freeze all outgoing payments to our Easton and Northfield vendors until we verify the receiving accounts, he said. And flag anything Rick touched in the last year. I want controls rebuilt from the ground up. He then called the district HR manager. I want a policy change added to onboarding by next quarter, anonymous reporting line direct to corporate. And I want every location retrained on customer integrity standards. No one pushes services customers don't ask for, period. Back on the floor, Graham found Tessa packing up her tools. You're actually leaving on time, he said. Feels weird. I keep thinking I forgot something. You didn't. Go home, rest. I'll be back early tomorrow. You sure you're okay holding the floor? I've got Ellie and Jordan. We'll manage. She gave him a look, part trust, part hesitation. Then she nodded and walked out. The rush hour crowd hit harder than expected. 3 walk-ins, 2 diagnostics, and a radiator swap. By 6, Graham's shoulders ached and his hands were black with grease, but he didn't leave the bay. He and Ellie worked the last car together, barely speaking, just moving with quiet coordination. When the job was done, Ellie leaned against the lift and exhaled. Didn't think I'd ever see the day where someone up top actually worked a shift, he said. You'll see more of it, Graham replied. I'm setting up a rotation. Every exec works ground level 1 week per quarter. No exceptions, Ellie nodded, wiping his hands. That'll change things. That's the idea. The next morning, the new tech arrived. Ramon, early 40s, clean record, came with solid references from the Westfield shop. Quiet but sharp. He jumped into a diagnostics job within 20 minutes of arriving and didn't need walking through the system. Tessa, back on the floor, watched him work for half an hour before giving Graham a rare nod of approval. Later, while reviewing a parts shipment, Ramon pulled Graham aside. Who used to run this location? Why? Couple of things in the inventory cage are tagged for vehicles we don't service anymore, like someone was stocking parts just to hit order volumes. Not anymore, Graham said. If you see anything that doesn't match, flag it. We're keeping things clean from now on. By Friday, things weren't perfect, but they were stable. The new scheduling system was live. The supply chain was under review, and customer satisfaction scores had started to tick back up, even in just a few days. Most importantly, the team wasn't bracing for impact anymore. Before leaving for the weekend, Graham gathered the team again, this time in the break room, now cleaned, restocked, and noticeably brighter with new lighting panels. I came here thinking I'd have to fix a few processes, he said. What I found was a culture that had been neglected. That's on me. Nobody interrupted. But you held it together anyway. You showed up. You did the work. From now on, that's what this company rewards. Not numbers on a spreadsheet. Character, integrity, teamwork. He looked at each of them. Tessa, you're officially promoted to site lead, effective Monday. Full authority to make personnel recommendations and escalate directly to my office if needed. She blinked, caught off guard. That's not a title we've used before. It is now, he turned to Ellie. You've proven yourself. Your ASE prep course is paid for. Take the time you need to study. When you pass, we'll bump your base pay and add you to the mentorship track. Ellie just nodded, eyes steady. Jordan, you told a customer the truth when it would have been easier not to. That's the culture we build from. I'm moving you to full-time. We'll train you on service writing next. Jordan stammered something, then just gave a small, stunned laugh. And Ramon, keep doing what you're doing. This team's stronger with you on it. After they filed out, Graham stayed behind and walked the shop floor alone. The scent of oil and rubber still hung in the air, but the tension that once clung to every corner was gone. He thought about all the times he'd sat in a boardroom believing spreadsheets could tell him everything. They never showed the overworked hands, the skipped breaks, or the fear in a customer's eyes when they didn't know if they were being taken advantage of. You had to stand in the grease to see that. He picked up a wrench someone had left behind and placed it back on the rack. Then he turned off the lights and locked the shop behind him, not as someone who had fixed everything, but as someone who finally saw what needed protecting and would never look away again.